First, here is the full opening and early CTA section from the competitor's original script. The thing about Betrayal is that it never announces itself with trumpets and fanfare. It slips through your front door wearing the face of someone you love. And by the time you realize what's happening, you're already broken on the floor. I pressed my face against the cold glass of my own front door, my swollen belly contracting with another wave of pain that sent fire through my spine. The porch light cast harsh shadows across my tear-stained cheeks as I watched my husband Julian laugh at something his mother whispered in his ear. They sat at our dining table, my grandmother's antique oak table that I'd refinished with my own hands, sharing coffee and pastries, like it was Sunday brunch instead of the night I was giving birth to his child. My child, our child. The child they'd locked outside in the freezing October rain. "Please," I whispered against the glass, my breath fogging the window. Another contraction hit, and I doubled over, gripping the doorframe with white knuckles. The pain was getting worse, coming faster. I needed to get to the hospital. I needed my husband. I needed help. But Dorothy, my mother-in-law, just smiled that cold, calculating smile and shook her head. Through the muffled glass, I could hear her voice. She made her choice when she disrespected this family. Let her figure it out herself. Julian, the man who'd promised to love and protect me until death do us part, didn't even look up from his coffee. That was the moment I died. Not physically, though my body felt like it was trying. The Malene who'd believed in fairy tales and happy endings, who'd trusted with her whole heart, who'd thought love could conquer anything. She died right there on that porch step, replaced by something harder, something that understood the only person who would save me was me. Before we continue, please write in the comment which country you are watching this video. We love knowing where our global family is tuning in from. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more epic revenge tales of life. Enjoy listening. Word count: 130 words. Competitor style analysis. Hook type starts in media res with a painful graphic visual. A woman in labor, physically locked out of her own home. It's visceral, humiliating, and immediate. Tone of voice: confessional, tragic, spoken like a private truth, told to a best friend or therapist. It bleeds betrayal. They say the worst betrayals don't come from enemies, but from the people who hold your hand while quietly tightening the noose. And I learned that on a humid Thursday night, barefoot, 9 months pregnant, and locked out of my own Southern-style porch, while my husband poured his mother another glass of Merlot inside the house I helped design. I was doubled over from a contraction that stole the breath from my lungs, pressing one palm against the glass-paneled front door of our whitewashed cottage in Savannah, Georgia. Our forever home, he'd once called it. The scent of gardenia wafted through the breeze, mixing with sweat and salt and fear as I watched Regina Whitmore, my mother-in-law, the town's darling queen bee, lift a shrimp canapé off the silver tray like nothing was wrong. She wore white, always white, a crisp linen dress and her signature pearls, the kind of southern grace that looked elegant from the outside, but cut like glass when she opened her mouth. "She's overreacting again," I heard her say through the glass, not even whispering, like I wasn't 3 feet away. "You know how dramatic she can be?" Honestly, If she can't handle a little discomfort now, how is she going to raise a Whitmore? Grant didn't argue. He laughed. Laughed. The same man who once rubbed cocoa butter on my swollen feet and promised me we'd raise this baby as equals. The same man who told me I was his soft place to land. That man didn't even stand up. Not when I knocked, not when I cried, not when I slid slowly down onto the porch steps, praying that the next wave of pain wouldn't make me pass out. That was the night I learned no one was coming to save me. And from that moment on, I stopped trying to be the perfect daughter-in-law and started becoming the woman who would burn down every lie they'd built. Before we go any deeper into this story, I want to know something. What would you have done in my shoes? Comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far our little storytelling family reaches. And if this is your first time on this channel, welcome. We share powerful stories about resilience, revenge, and rising above family betrayal. Please hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us continue sharing voices that deserve to be heard. Now, back to that porch, back to that moment where everything changed. I'd married into the Whitmore family 3 years earlier, thinking I was gaining stability, tradition, and maybe even love. What I didn't realize was that I'd stepped into a legacy of control, masked by manicured smiles and weekend charity luncheons. Regina wasn't just a Southern socialite. She was a master puppeteer, and every event, every whispered comment, every birthday card with passive-aggressive notes scribbled under the Hallmark message had been part of her slow campaign to erase me. My name is Avery Morgan, and I was born and raised in Tennessee, daughter of a carpenter and a community college librarian. I was proud of that. I made things with my hands, designs, furniture, interiors that brought people joy. Grant, a financial planner in his family's generational firm, said he loved that about me, said I was real in a world full of artifice. But once we moved to Savannah, things shifted. Regina started showing up at our house with paint swatches before I'd unpacked my boxes. She corrected my grammar in front of guests. She asked why I insisted on working when Grant made enough for both of us. She offered to redecorate the nursery I'd already hand-painted in soft sage green, calling it too earthy for a Whitmore child. I said nothing. I told myself she meant well, that she'd warm up, that if I just proved myself, smiled enough, nodded politely, held my tongue, she'd see I was worthy of their name. But I wasn't building a family. I was being absorbed into an empire, and every boundary I set was viewed as disobedience. That night on the porch, when the pain started and I asked to go to the hospital, Regina had said it was too soon. She said real Southern women didn't panic. I said I knew my body. She said, "Your body doesn't know what's best. My son and I do." Then she smiled like she'd won something, like this was a test I'd failed. Grant looked at me and shrugged. "Maybe wait a few hours," he said, as if contractions 5 minutes apart weren't real enough. When I stepped outside to breathe, to call for help, the door locked behind me, quietly, deliberately, and they didn't come. They just sat there, ate, drank, laughed. And that's when something in me cracked, not just as a woman, but as a mother, as someone who suddenly understood I was the only thing standing between my child and a lifetime of invisible cages. And no matter how much pain I was in, I would not be the one left crying behind glass ever again. It's strange how clearly you remember the worst night of your life. Not in flashes, but in sharp, endless detail. I remember the porch light flickering above me, casting halos on the chipped white paint. I remember the sticky warmth of that Georgia air pressing down on me like a second skin. I remember sitting on the top step, hands trembling, timing the contractions on my phone, and thinking, if I die out here, they'll say it was a misunderstanding, a tragedy, but never their fault. I tried knocking again, this time with the side of my fist, but my arms felt weak and the pain made it hard to breathe. I called Grant's phone. He didn't answer. I tried the house phone. No pickup. I could still see them through the window, seated at the dining room table. Regina had shifted to some story about her college debutante ball, her manicured hand gesturing toward the chandelier above them like she was hosting a bridal shower instead of ignoring her daughter-in-law mid-labor. My eyes landed on a piece of art hanging behind her, one of my earliest interior design pieces, a warm-toned abstract I'd painted during a good summer back in Nashville. She hated it, said it clashed with the Whitmore aesthetic. But it stayed up, only because Grant insisted I needed to feel represented in the house. Watching her laugh beneath it, wine glass in hand, I felt like I was watching a stranger reenact a life that used to be mine. Eventually, I gave up on the door and tried to call 911 myself, but I'd left my phone on the kitchen island during the commotion, and my watch wasn't connected. I was trapped, outside my own home, in labor, with no way to leave, no one to call, and a body that was shaking from the inside out. A neighbor's porch light flicked on across the street. I almost screamed for help. Almost. But pride is a funny thing, isn't it? It whispers stupid ideas like, don't make a scene. Don't give them something else to use against you. Instead, I got up, slowly, one hand on the banister, one on my stomach, and I walked barefoot down the gravel path to the curb. Every step felt like lightning tearing through my spine. But I made it to the edge of the road and sat down hard on the grass, legs splayed like a broken doll. That's when I felt the warm rush. My water had broken. I laughed. Honest to God laughed. The kind of dry, hollow laugh you only hear from people on the edge of something they're never coming back from. I was going to give birth on the side of a quiet Savannah street, with hydrangeas blooming behind me and no one to hold my hand. But the universe, as cruel as it had been, hadn't abandoned me entirely. A pickup truck turned onto the street. I saw its headlights cut through the dark like salvation. It slowed, stopped, and then I heard the voice. "Ma'am, are you all right?" It was Noah, our neighbor from 3 doors down. He was younger than me, a mechanic who worked odd hours and mostly kept to himself. I'd helped him choose curtains for his mom's living room once, and he still mowed his yard like he was preparing for a county fair competition. I remember him running to me, the panic in his voice rising as he took in the soaked nightgown, the trembling limbs, the clear distress. "You're in labor. Oh God. Okay, hang on. I'm calling an ambulance." I tried to shake my head, tried to say something, but the words were all jumbled and useless. So he did what no one else had done that night. He acted. Called 911, pulled a blanket from the back of his truck, sat beside me, holding my hand while I screamed into the void. By the time the ambulance arrived, I was drifting in and out of consciousness, fighting the pressure and pain with every ounce of strength I had left. I remember the EMT's face, kind eyes, sharp voice, hands moving fast. I remember the IV prick, the oxygen mask, the blinding ambulance lights as they wheeled me in. The paramedics kept asking where my husband was. I didn't answer. I just stared at the ceiling and whispered my baby's name like a prayer. Ren, Ren, Ren. She was born 4 hours later. 5 pounds, 11 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that screamed like she was already furious with the world. I held her against my chest and sobbed into her scalp. She was perfect, and she was mine. And I would never, ever let Regina get her hands on her soul. The hospital staff kept asking about family, who to call, who would be coming to visit. I lied. I said we'd had a fight, that they didn't know I'd gone into labor, that they'd show up eventually, but they didn't. Not the next morning, not the day after. Grant sent a text that said, "Hope everything went okay. We didn't think it was real. Let us know when you're ready to come home." I stared at that message for 10 minutes, wondering what kind of man watched his wife go into labor and then pretended it was all a misunderstanding. Then I deleted his number. Not forever, but long enough. The hospital room became my sanctuary. Nurse Emma brought me tea and rubbed my back while I cried in silence. A night shift tech named Jordan gave Ren a tiny crocheted hat and told me his sister had raised him alone, and she turned out just fine. These strangers were more family than anyone bearing the Whitmore name had been to me. On the third morning, I stood at the window, Ren asleep against my chest, and looked out at the city skyline. That's when I made the decision. I wasn't going back. Not to that house. Not to that table, not to that name, not without a plan, not without power. They thought locking me out would keep me in my place. But what they didn't realize was that sometimes the woman you leave out in the dark is the one who learns how to burn the whole house down with nothing but silence, receipts, and a good lawyer. I'd been their puppet long enough. Now it was my turn to pull the strings. The first time I held Ren after deciding not to go back, I looked down at her tiny face and felt something old fall away. Something soft, obedient, scared. In its place, a new voice stirred, one that whispered things I'd never dared believe. You're not just allowed to fight back. You're expected to. For her. I didn't storm out of the hospital or stage some dramatic exit. That's not how the Whitmores operate, and I knew better than to play their game by their rules. I smiled when the discharge nurse asked if someone was coming to pick us up. Yes, I lied. Just a little late. Then I called a cab, tucked Ren against me in her car seat, and had the driver take us to an extended stay hotel on the other side of town. Far from our street. Far from that porch. I paid cash. I registered under my maiden name. And I disappeared. Just enough to make them worry, but not enough to make them panic. Not yet. The next few days were a blur of bottle feedings, sore stitches, and watching the sunrise through cheap curtains. But even in exhaustion, my mind was working, thinking. Remembering. It was easy to feel powerless after what happened. But when I really sat with it, I started realizing how many little things I already knew. Things I had overlooked or dismissed for the sake of keeping peace. Regina was careless in her confidence, arrogant. She thought I was too soft to be dangerous. But I'd been listening for years. I remembered the way she once bragged about cleaning up Grant's ex-girlfriend's social media footprint after the girl posted something about being used. Regina called it reputation management. I remembered how she always made Grant sign papers without reading them, saying, "That's just the estate paperwork. Dad set it up before he passed." I remembered the moment I realized Grant didn't even have the passwords to the family trust accounts. "Mom handles all that," he'd said once while brushing his teeth like it was nothing. So I started writing things down: patterns, names, dates. I didn't have a plan, not exactly, but I had intuition, and that's more dangerous than people think. While Ren slept, I made lists. While she ate, I listened to recorded voicemails I'd kept over the years, the passive-aggressive ones, the barely veiled threats. I started tracing Regina's reach, her family's nonprofit, Whitmore Women's Wellness Foundation, the land grant she'd boasted about at dinner parties, the realtor friend who always called her before an estate sale went public. Every thread I pulled revealed another. By day 6, I'd filled an entire notebook. I needed help. Not someone flashy or expensive, someone smart and quiet, someone who wouldn't blink at a family like the Whitmores. That's when I remembered someone from my early design days. Rachel Quinn, a legal assistant I'd once worked with on a housing discrimination case. Back then, she was newly certified and hungry. Now, she ran her own boutique firm that specialized in family estate audits, asset tracking, and marital crisis support. I emailed her at midnight using a temporary burner account. I told her I needed to know who actually owned what in my marriage, and whether any of it could be taken from me if I filed for separation. She responded in under an hour. Subject: "Let's get to work. And don't worry, you're not the first woman to get locked out by a legacy." Rachel didn't just investigate, she excavated. She walked me through financial statements I didn't even know existed, taught me how to legally download backup data from Grant's shared drive, which I still had access to. Because in all their preparation for war, the Whitmores hadn't imagined I'd actually leave. She helped me request a quiet freeze on joint accounts under the pretext of unauthorized use, while we prepared a separate custody filing under emergency grounds, documenting the night of Ren's birth, my hospital intake forms, and the absence of any family support. But more than that, Rachel helped me find something I hadn't realized I'd been looking for: a thread of truth that could unravel Regina's whole curated image. It came from a folder labeled Foundation Documentation, buried in a subdirectory under Grant's name. Inside were receipts, donation records that didn't match public filings, payout ledgers, and contractor invoices that referenced properties never disclosed in city databases. In plain English, tax fraud, misreported land values. A nonprofit running 2 books, the Whitmore Women's Wellness Foundation wasn't just corrupt, it was vulnerable. And Regina had signed every check. I printed copies, saved backups, sent encrypted files to Rachel, and one to a cloud drive labeled baby blanket photos, just in case I ever needed a quiet nuclear option. I was tired, still healing, running on fumes, but for the first time in years, I felt alive. Like I wasn't just surviving, I was outmaneuvering. Regina may have spent decades building her kingdom, but I had something she didn't: her blind spot. Me. Still, I moved carefully. I didn't post on social media. I didn't contact Grant. I let them sit in their silence and spin whatever story made them sleep at night. Because the truth? I wasn't ready for confrontation. Not yet. I was still building, still gathering strength. But I knew something they didn't. I had learned how power works in a family like theirs. It's not about who shouts the loudest. It's about who knows when to speak and what receipts to drop when they do. I wasn't going to raise my daughter in a house where silence was mistaken for obedience and wine-stained manipulation passed as maternal concern. Regina wanted a legacy. I was going to give her one. A long, slow reckoning wrapped in legal filings, public shame, and the cold realization that the girl she thought was just a pretty distraction had become the storm at her doorstep. The plan had started. Now, I just had to wait for the right moment to let it unfold. I always thought the hardest part would be leaving, walking away from the only home I'd known as a wife, disappearing into a hotel room with nothing but a diaper bag, a baby, and a burner phone. But I was wrong. The hardest part was staying gone. The Whitmores didn't chase me at first. They circled, like vultures, quiet, calculated. For the first week, there was nothing. No texts, no calls. Then it started small. A flower arrangement at the hospital. From the family. No names, no note. A package sent to the extended stay front desk with designer newborn clothes Regina would have picked. Subtle reminders that they still believed they were in control, even from a distance. It was psychological warfare, wrapped in pastel ribbons and monogrammed bibs. Then came the letter. Not from Grant. From a lawyer. One of the city's flashiest firms, known for celebrity prenups and discreet damage control. The envelope was thick, heavy. I opened it while Wren napped beside me, her tiny chest rising and falling with rhythmic innocence. Inside, I found 2 pages of legalese, thinly veiled threats disguised as concern. Given your recent actions and absence from the family property, concern has arisen regarding mental fitness and maternal well-being. I stopped reading. My hands started shaking. They weren't just trying to pull me back. They were laying the groundwork to paint me as unstable, delusional. They were coming for my baby. I emailed everything to Rachel, trying not to spiral. Her response was quick, steady. They're bluffing, but we escalate now. Custody protection motion, filed by morning. And we did. She compiled every medical record from the night of Wren's birth, along with signed affidavits from the EMTs and the hospital's social worker. We drafted a formal timeline of events, highlighting my attempts to seek care and Regina's interference without even needing the juiciest details. Not yet. The judge granted us a temporary stay, a legal barrier, keeping them from attempting custody claims until a full hearing. That bought us time, but not peace. Regina didn't like legal walls. She preferred social ones. Within days, word began spreading through Savannah's charity circles that I had taken the baby and left without warning, that I was going through something emotional, that I'd been under stress, and Grant just wanted his family back together. It was masterfully spun. No outright lies, just enough suggestion to create a fog of doubt. Even my former clients started pulling back. Projects put on pause, invoices delayed, a few polite cancellations that stung more than I admitted. Regina was doing what she'd always done, killing reputation before reality. And Grant. God, Grant. He finally broke his silence with a voicemail 2 weeks after I left. His voice was cracked at the edges, softer than I remembered. "I miss you," he said. "I miss her. I didn't know. I didn't know what to do that night. Mom said it was too soon, and I panicked." He paused. "I just want to fix this. I just want my girls back." I didn't return the call. I couldn't. Not because it didn't hurt, because it hurt too much. Because some twisted part of me still wanted to believe the man I married was buried beneath that voice. But this wasn't about me anymore. It was about Wren and what kind of life I'd let her be born into. Still, the silence between us gnawed at me. Regina was moving in public. Grant was moving in private. And I was stuck in between, changing diapers during the day and writing legal responses at night, holding my daughter while wondering if the walls were closing in or if I was finally learning how to stand. And then came the knock at the door. It was dusk. The hotel room was bathed in amber light. Wren was asleep in her portable crib, and I was drinking cold coffee out of a paper cup when I heard it. 3 firm knocks. I froze, looked through the peephole. My stomach dropped. Regina, dressed in beige slacks, pearls, and that unreadable face she wore to funerals and fundraisers alike. Her posture perfect, her eyes dead calm. I didn't open the door. She spoke anyway. Avery, she called softly, like she was standing in a church pew instead of outside a budget hotel. I know you're in there. I just want to talk. Just 5 minutes. I didn't move. She waited 30 seconds, then placed a white envelope under the door and walked away without looking back. I stared at that envelope like it might detonate. Inside, a single note card, thick ivory embossed with her initials. There are ways this can be peaceful. We are, after all, family. Let's not forget who that baby really is. No signature, no warmth, just a warning in cursive. I wanted to scream, throw something. But Wren stirred, and I swallowed the fury. Instead, I scanned the note and sent it to Rachel. No response, she texted back. Every move they make, we document. Stay calm. This is how scared people act when they realize they're not in charge anymore. And that's when I realized something I hadn't seen before. Regina was slipping. She had always controlled everything from behind velvet curtains, never directly, never publicly. But now she was showing up at hotel doors, writing notes, sending lawyers. That wasn't strength. That was fear in expensive clothing. The harder she pushed, the more cracks appeared in her armor. And if she was cracking, it meant the moment I was waiting for, the perfect moment to strike, was almost here. But I had to hold the line just a little longer. The morning of the Whitmore Women's Wellness Gala was like any other Southern Spring event. Overdressed, overfunded, and overstaged. But what no one knew, not the guests sipping champagne under chandeliers, nor the socialites comparing donations in front of live violins, was that the woman they'd spent months whispering about, the one they said had lost it, the one who ran off with the baby, was already in the building, watching it all unfold from behind the curtain. I hadn't intended to be there. My plan didn't require my presence. But Rachel had called the night before, her voice more electric than usual. The IRS verified the discrepancy reports we submitted, and the press packet? It's live tomorrow at 8 a.m., exactly when Regina's press photographer plans to release those smug red carpet shots. Her pause said it all. If you want to see the empire crack in real time, this is your shot. So I went. I wore a simple navy dress, no makeup, hair tied back. I wasn't there to impress. I was there to watch a legacy unravel. I entered through the service entrance, thanks to one of Regina's former caterers, who was more than happy to help after being stiffed on a payment years ago, and stood in the wings of the ballroom, hidden behind thick velvet curtains, holding a burner phone and a folder labeled Freedom. Regina stood on stage beside Grant, who looked visibly exhausted. Maybe it was the legal filings. Maybe it was the silence I'd kept since ignoring his last 3 messages. Or maybe, finally, he was starting to see what kind of woman had raised him. Regina smiled for the cameras like a woman who just inherited the state of Georgia, not one whose financial crimes were sitting on a reporter's desk, pre-scheduled for front-page coverage. She gestured at a model nursery mock-up behind her, surrounded by floral arches and soft music. "Every child deserves a healthy beginning," she said into the microphone. "And our foundation is the reason so many women across the state can dream of brighter futures." The crowd applauded. The music swelled. She'd always been a master at setting the scene, but she hadn't written the next act. At exactly 8:02 a.m., every phone in the ballroom buzzed. The room shifted, slight collective confusion. Then murmurs, heads bowed, screens lit up, and there it was. A live investigative story from the state's top news outlet, exclusive, financial fraud, and fabricated reports inside the Whitmore Women's Wellness Foundation. The article opened with forged donation documents, then false vendor claims, then internal bank statements bearing Regina's signature, then a quote from me, short and direct. "I gave birth alone because the woman who ran this foundation chose image over decency. I won't let my daughter be raised under a name built on lies." The room exploded, in whispers, in movement, in gasps. Regina froze mid-smile, her hand still raised as if to toast. Someone rushed to her side. Grant pulled out his phone. A man in the front row stood and left. Another woman, an event sponsor, quietly dropped her name badge onto a nearby table and walked out. From where I stood, it was like watching glass crack in slow motion. Every delicate piece of the world she'd constructed began to shatter, not with fire or fury, but with undeniable digital receipts. Cold, clean, public, and it wasn't over. At 8:05, Rachel hit send on the second wave, an open file released to select journalists outlining the forged tax filings, duplicate invoices, and insider land dealings used to inflate the value of foundation assets. It was enough to trigger a full federal audit, one Regina couldn't talk her way out of. By 8:11, the foundation's website was down. By 8:17, the state charity board had released a statement announcing an internal investigation. And by 8:20, a reporter from Channel 9 cornered Grant as he stepped off stage. "Mr. Whitmore, did you have knowledge of your mother's alleged financial misconduct? And what's your response to your wife's public statement?" He didn't answer. He looked stunned, not angry, not even betrayed. Just like someone who finally realized the spell had broken, and there was no going back. I slipped out, unnoticed. No grand confrontation, no face-to-face vindication. I didn't need it, because for the first time since Ren was born, I felt something I hadn't dared feel. Safe. Back at the hotel, I turned off my phone and wrapped Ren in a soft yellow blanket. She babbled, unaware that her future had just shifted in a way she might never understand. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just held her, still and grateful, and whispered, "That's done. We're free." The call started within the hour. Rachel handled the lawyers, the media requests, the lawsuits Regina's board members would soon file against her. The formal custody motion was submitted the same day, backed by a mountain of documented abuse and proof that my separation wasn't abandonment. It was self-preservation. But what stayed with me most was the image of Regina's face when the phone started buzzing, her expression frozen, caught between two worlds, the one she ruled and the one crashing down around her. She had built her name on polished appearances, tight-lipped tradition, and ruthless control. And I had taken it apart with evidence, silence, and a single, well-timed press release. Some people say revenge is best served cold. Mine was served in real time, on live TV, with every lie she'd ever told, unraveling like the ribbon on one of her donation baskets. And this was just the beginning of the fallout. By the time the first subpoenas hit Regina's estate mailbox, Savannah had already decided she was guilty. The court of public opinion didn't wait for due process. In a town where appearances were gospel and charity galas were holy ground, Regina's fall wasn't just dramatic, it was biblical. Within 2 weeks, her name had been stripped from the foundation's masthead. A statement was issued citing administrative restructuring, but everyone knew the truth. Donors pulled funding. Board members distanced themselves with carefully worded emails. Her beloved garden brunch, usually the talk of spring, was canceled for renovations. But we all knew it was shame, not siding, that kept her behind locked gates. And Grant? He unraveled slower. His law firm placed him on indefinite leave, citing reputational exposure. Apparently, clients weren't thrilled to see his last name trending beside headlines like Whitmore Foundation under federal audit. When he tried to post a neutral statement on LinkedIn, something vague about family turbulence and integrity in difficult times, the comments turned savage within an hour. People remembered. People screenshot. The internet never forgets. Especially when you once let your wife give birth on a porch step and called it a misunderstanding. He emailed me the night he lost his job. No subject line, just a few lines of confession. I thought she was protecting us. I didn't realize she was protecting herself. I wish I had seen you, really seen you. I'm sorry. It was the first time he didn't try to fix, explain, or deflect. He didn't ask for Ren, didn't ask me to come back, just said what needed to be said. And somehow, that made it worse, because I believed him. And belief is more dangerous than anger. Anger you can protect yourself from, but belief can crawl in through the cracks and make you second-guess everything you've built. Still, I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to Rachel. She added it to the custody file. 3 weeks after the gala, the court granted me full temporary custody of Ren, with supervised visitation allowed for Grant under terms I set. No Regina, no Whitmore property, no unsupervised handoffs. And while the paperwork felt like victory, it tasted like ash. I'd gotten everything I wanted, and it still didn't feel like enough, because consequences don't always satisfy. Sometimes they just expose how much damage was done before justice ever arrived. Meanwhile, life didn't pause. Diapers still needed changing, bottles still needed warming, rent still needed paying. Rachel offered to connect me with press outlets interested in telling my side, even hinted at a podcast producer reaching out about a miniseries deal. But I declined. Not because I didn't want the truth out there, but because I'd already told it, and the people who needed to hear it had heard it loud and clear. I started taking on small design jobs again. Online clients, Etsy orders, local staging projects under a new business name, Avery Morgan Interiors. No Whitmore, no history, just me. It was slow work, humble. But every lamp I installed, every gallery wall I curated, was a small act of reclamation. A reminder that I could still build something from scratch, that not everything had to be a war zone. The hardest part, though, wasn't the money or the logistics. It was telling Wren stories. She was too young to understand, of course. But every time I held her and whispered lullabies, I felt the ache of all the explanations I'd one day owe her. About why her father wasn't around every day. About why Grandma Regina wouldn't be at school, recitals, or birthday parties. About how love can sometimes look like silence, like walking away, like rebuilding. The only person I spoke to regularly from the old world was Noah, the neighbor who'd found me on the lawn the night it all began. He'd started stopping by the studio to help fix shelves or lift heavy boxes. He never pried, never judged. Just showed up with a toolbox and left with a half smile. One afternoon, while helping me measure curtain rods, he said, "You know, I don't think people change. I think they just drop the mask. You're not different now. You're just finally being seen." That stuck with me because for so long, I thought I'd become someone new, stronger, colder, harder. But the truth was, I'd just stopped pretending I wasn't already all of those things. The softness didn't leave. It just got sharper, more focused, more protective, especially when it came to Wren. 1 month after the court ruling, I received a certified letter at the studio. No return address. But the handwriting was unmistakable. Regina. Inside was a single page, crisp linen paper, carefully worded, and venomously polite. Avery, I hope you feel proud of what you've done. You've dismantled decades of work with one tantrum and a laptop. I won't fight you in court. I'm too old for theatrics. But I will say this. My granddaughter is a Whitmore, no matter what name she carries. And one day, she will come asking questions. I hope you're ready to answer them. R.W. I stared at the note, waiting for the fury. But it never came. Only sadness. Sadness for a woman who spent her entire life building empires and still didn't understand that legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you pass on. And I would never pass on her version of love. So I placed the letter in a drawer I didn't open again. Then I picked up Wren, held her close, and whispered the only truth that mattered. You are not your bloodline. You are mine. And that's enough. I used to think peace would feel like silence, like an empty inbox, a courtroom gavel slamming closure into place, or maybe even Regina finally admitting she'd been wrong. But now, standing barefoot on the back deck of our tiny rental house, coffee in one hand, Wren asleep against my shoulder, I realize I'd been wrong about what peace actually is. It's not the absence of noise. It's the absence of fear. It's knowing that when I wake up in the morning, there's no one watching me through pearl-coated judgment. That I can pick out yellow curtains just because I like them. Paint a mural on the wall without anyone calling it childish. And raise my daughter without feeling like I have to ask permission to be her mother. Peace, it turns out, is the moment you stop surviving and start living. Even if it's quiet, even if it's small. It's been 6 months since the gala, since Regina's empire crumbled, since Grant stopped trying to call. The last I heard, he moved into a condo on the east side and took a job at a mid-sized firm in Charleston. We still coordinate visitation through the lawyer, and while he's shown up every time, on time, respectful, quiet, he never asked to talk. Not really. And I don't offer more than what's needed. We coexist now, strangers with a shared miracle between us. Wren is crawling, fast. She has a scream like a thunderclap when she doesn't like her food, and a smile that takes over her whole face. I took down the blackout curtains and replaced them with gauzy linen ones that let the sunlight in. Every morning, it hits her crib just right, like a soft halo, and every morning I whisper the same thing. You're safe now. You're free. My business is small, but it's mine. I work while Wren naps, creating design packages and digital room plans for other women who are also building their own beginnings. A few of my clients have read the story. They always hesitate before bringing it up. You're that Avery, they'll ask, and I just nod. Because yes, I'm that Avery, but I'm also this Avery, the one who survived it, who burned the map and drew her own, who chose her daughter over decorum, over status, over pretending everything was okay. I've stopped trying to make sense of Regina. She hasn't been charged yet, though the audit is still underway. Savannah doesn't talk about her much now, except in hushed tones, like she's a ghost floating through garden parties they're too polite to admit they invited. I sometimes wonder if she lies awake at night in her mansion, wondering how it all slipped through her fingers. If she blames me, if she hates me. But mostly, I just hope she realizes this was never about revenge. It was about release and grant. Sometimes I wonder what might have happened if he'd opened that door, if he'd stood up, if he'd said, "Mom, stop." But wondering doesn't change the past. And I've learned the hard way that love built on silence and compliance isn't love. It's a contract. One I never signed. I've also learned that motherhood isn't about perfection. It's not about curated nurseries or last names printed on onesies. It's about presence. It's about protecting your child even when your voice shakes, especially when it shakes. It's about being the person you needed when you were younger. Only now, you're doing it for someone else. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night sweating, sure that someone's outside the door, that I'm back on that porch, locked out, aching, alone. And then I roll over, feel Wren's soft breath on my neck, and I remember. We made it out. We made it home. And I know not every woman in my shoes gets the chance to fight back. I know some of them are still locked out, still being gaslit, still afraid to speak. So, to them, to you, if that's where you are, I want to say this. You're not crazy. You're not dramatic. You're not selfish. You're waking up. And when you do, when you finally listen to that small, stubborn voice inside you that says, "This isn't okay," you will change everything. Maybe not overnight, maybe not with fireworks, but brick by brick, boundary by boundary, truth by painful truth, you will reclaim your name, your worth, your future. And if you're watching this and you've been through hell and back like I have, I hope you know something. You are not broken. You are rebuilt. Not by revenge, but by remembering who you were before they told you who to be. Wren just stirred in her crib. The morning light's creeping in. It's time to go hold her. Time to start the day. Not as a victim, not as a Whitmore, but as myself, as a mother, as the woman who said enough and meant it. Thank you for walking this story with me. If it helped you in any way, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if this is your first time joining us, welcome, subscribe. We tell stories here, real ones, about rising, reclaiming, and rewriting the ending. Because sometimes the only way to break a legacy is to become the first woman in your family who refuses to repeat it.